I told her everything. The drugs, Marissa's betrayal, my parents' abandonment, the hours of thinking my life was over. She listened without interrupting, making small sounds of comfort and outrage in all the right places. "Ay, mija," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry, but I'm not surprised." "You're not? Your parents, they always made excuses for that girl. And you always made excuses for all of them. But you can't love people into being different than they are." The wisdom of it hit me like a revelation. You can't love people into being different than they are. All these years, I'd been trying to earn their love by being perfect, by not causing problems, by making myself smaller so they could pretend their family wasn't broken. But some people are only capable of conditional love, and some families are only functional when one person does all the work of maintaining the dysfunction. "Come home," Abuela said. "I'll make your favorite dinner and we'll figure out what comes next." What came next? For the first time in years, the future felt like something I got to choose instead of something that was chosen for me. "I'll be there in an hour," I said. And for the first time all day, I smiled. 6 months later, I got the scholarship after all. Different program, different country, same dream that nobody could take away from me. Turns out, when you explain to admissions committees that you missed your original interview because your sister framed you for federal drug charges, they tend to be pretty understanding about rescheduling. I'm writing this from my dorm room in Barcelona, looking out at a view my family will never see, living a life they tried to destroy, and I've never been happier. The truth, as it turns out, really does set you free, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. The end. My sister planted evidence in my purse at airport security, and my parents backed her up. That's not a metaphor. That's not drama. That's exactly what happened to me. Natalie Cruz, 26 years old, former invisible daughter, current legal miracle. When I walked into LAX that Tuesday morning, I still had scuffed sneakers and a patched backpack. I still thought I lived in a normal family. I still thought loyalty was a two-way street. But the second my mom started fussing over Marissa's outfit instead of asking if I had everything for my interview, something cracked. Not just in the air, but in me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I checked my purse for the 100th time. Passport, boarding pass, interview notes, lucky pen from Grandma Rosa. Everything in its place, organized like my life finally was. This scholarship interview in London wasn't just a trip. It was my ticket out of being the overlooked daughter, the space filler, the "at least she's not Marissa," until suddenly I wasn't even that. "You sure you're not forgetting anything?" Dad asked, but his eyes were on his phone. Standard operating procedure. He'd been working double shifts for months, claiming we needed the money, but I knew he just preferred the quiet of his warehouse to the chaos Marissa brought home. Marissa lounged against the departure board like she owned the place, scrolling through Instagram stories. 24 years old, college dropout, 3 jobs in 6 months, but still mom's precious baby. She wore that oversized hoodie I'd bought her for Christmas, the one she claimed was too nice to wear around me. "Running away from the family again," she said without looking up from her phone. Her voice carried that practiced sweetness she used when other people were around. Innocent, concerned, poisonous. "It's a scholarship interview," I said. "Graduate programs don't wait." She finally looked at me, and something flickered in her eyes. Not pride, not support. Something darker, hungrier. "Right. The smart sister gets to travel the world while the rest of us are stuck here." Mom jumped in before I could respond. "Marissa, don't be like that. Natalie worked hard for this opportunity." But her hand went to Marissa's shoulder, not mine.
It always did. Though I wish you weren't going so far away, mija. What if something happens? That's when I should have known. Mom never worried about me traveling. When I went to college 3 hours away, she didn't even help me pack. But suddenly, with this trip that could change everything, she was concerned? The four of us moved through the terminal like a broken parade. Mom chattering nervously about flight times and weather, Dad checking his watch every 30 seconds, Marissa trailing behind, too quiet, which should have been my first red flag. Marissa was never quiet unless she was planning something. At the security checkpoint, the familiar chaos buzzed around us. Business travelers juggling laptops and coffee cups, families wrestling with car seats and strollers, the endless shuffle of shoes and belts and the electronic beeping that never stopped. I hugged them goodbye at the security line. Dad's hug was quick, distracted. Mom held on too long, whispering, "Be careful, okay? Call when you land." But when Marissa hugged me, something felt different. Her hand lingered near my purse, adjusting the strap. "Good luck, sis. Hope everything works out exactly like you planned." The words should have been encouraging. Instead, they felt like a warning. I waved one last time before entering the security maze. Behind the glass partition, I could see them watching. Mom dabbing her eyes with a tissue, Dad already reaching for his car keys, and Marissa standing perfectly still, her face blank as stone. That's when I should have turned around, should have demanded to know what she meant, should have listened to the voice in my head screaming that something was wrong. Instead, I stepped into line, clutching my boarding pass like a lifeline. This was it. My moment. My chance to finally matter, to prove I was more than the daughter who never caused problems because nobody bothered to notice her enough to care. The scanner beeped.
Not the regular beep, not the please step forward beep or the arms above your head beep. This was different, sharper. The kind of sound that cuts through airport noise and makes everyone in a 50-foot radius turn their heads. I was still smiling when TSA Officer Daniels approached me at the conveyor belt, still thinking about interview questions and plain peanuts and whether I'd remembered to pack my phone charger, still living in the world where the worst thing that could happen was a delayed flight. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside for a bag check." The words hit me like cold water. "I'm sorry, what?" "Random selection," he said, but his voice was too careful, too professional. His badge read, "Daniels, K," and his eyes read, "Don't even think about arguing." Behind me, the security line kept moving. People glanced over with that mix of curiosity and relief that comes from watching someone else get selected for additional screening. "Thank God it's not me," their faces said. "Poor girl, but at least I can make my connection." Officer Daniels lifted my purse, the leather bag that contained my entire future, and set it on a separate table under harsh fluorescent lights. Everything looked different under those lights. Harsher, more suspicious. "Is this your bag, ma'am?" "Yes," my voice sounded smaller than I meant it to. "I packed it myself this morning." He unzipped the main compartment with practiced efficiency. "Passport? Check. Boarding pass? Check. Interview notes in a manila folder? Check. Lucky pen from Grandma Rosa." He stopped. His hand froze halfway into the bag, and something changed in his posture. Straightened, sharpened. The kind of change that made my stomach drop before my brain even understood why. "Ma'am, are these yours?" He pulled out 2 prescription bottles, amber plastic, white caps, no labels. The kind of bottles that scream illegal, even if they're not. Behind them, tucked in the side pocket I never used, a small Ziploc bag with white powder. The world tilted. "No," I said, but the word came out wrong. Weak. Guilty sounding, even though I was telling the truth. "Those aren't mine. I've never seen them before." But Officer Daniels wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the bottles, turning them over in his latex-gloved hands like evidence at a crime scene. Which I realized with growing horror they probably were. A crowd was gathering. The kind of crowd that forms when someone's day goes sideways in public. Passengers craning their necks,
other TSA officers drifting over like sharks sensing blood in the water, all those eyes, all those assumptions, all those people already deciding I was guilty of something. "I need to call my supervisor," Officer Daniels said, and my heart stopped. "Wait, please." The desperation in my voice was embarrassing, but I couldn't stop it. "I don't know how those got there. This has to be some kind of mistake." He set the bottles and bag in a plastic evidence container, sealing it with official-looking tape. Each movement was careful, deliberate, final. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me for secondary screening." Secondary screening. The words every traveler fears. The place where random selections go to die and connecting flights become missed opportunities. That's when I heard my name. "Natalie!" I turned to see Mom rushing toward the security checkpoint, her face a mask of shock and concern. Behind her, Dad looked grim and embarrassed, like I'd already been convicted. And Marissa? Marissa looked perfect. Calm. Almost serene. Like she was watching a movie instead of her sister's life imploding in real time. "What's happening?" Mom called out to Officer Daniels. "Is she in trouble?" The officer's expression softened slightly when he saw my concerned family, because that's what they looked like from the outside. Worried parents, supportive sister, all of us caught in an unfortunate misunderstanding. "We found some questionable items in her bag," he explained. "Standard procedure is to investigate." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest like she'd been struck. "Oh no! Oh, Natalie, what did you do?"
What did I do? The question hit me like a slap. Not what happened, or this must be a mistake, or how can we help? What did I do? Like guilt was assumed, like disappointment was expected. "I didn't do anything," I said, but my voice was shaking now. "Mom, I swear, those aren't mine." That's when Marissa spoke up. Sweet, concerned, perfect Marissa. "She's been really stressed about this interview," she said, her voice carrying just the right amount of worry. "And she's been acting kind of different lately. Distant. Maybe she was trying to calm her nerves?" The lie was so smooth, so reasonable, so perfectly constructed that for a second, even I almost believed it. Marissa had always been good at rewriting reality, but this was masterclass-level manipulation. Officer Daniels nodded slowly, processing this new information. The stressed student narrative, the concerned family, the drugs that explained everything. "I don't do drugs. I've never done drugs. Ask anyone who knows me." But the damage was done. In Marissa's version of events, I was the unstable sister, the academic pressure cooker, the good girl who'd finally cracked. And my parents, my own parents, were nodding along like this made perfect sense. Dad wouldn't even look at me. "Ma'am," Officer Daniels said, and his tone had shifted from professional to sympathetic, like I was sick instead of criminal. "I'm going to need you to come with me. We'll get this sorted out." As he led me toward a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," I looked back one more time at my family. Mom was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the devastated mother. Dad was staring at his shoes, already mentally writing the story he'd tell his coworkers about his disappointing daughter. And Marissa was watching me with those calm, dark eyes, her face completely unreadable. But just for a second, just long enough for me to catch it, the corner of her mouth lifted in the smallest, coldest smile I'd ever seen. That's when I knew. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. The TSA holding room smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Gray walls, gray table, gray chairs that had absorbed years of other people's worst days. I sat there in handcuffs, actual handcuffs, the kind I'd only seen in movies, watching Officer Daniels document my crime with the methodical precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Through the one-way mirror, I could see my family in the adjacent room, waiting, discussing, probably deciding what story they'd tell the neighbors about their criminal daughter who'd embarrassed them at the airport. But I wasn't thinking about neighbors or stories or even the interview I was definitely going to miss. I was thinking about Marissa's smile, that tiny, satisfied curve of her lips right before the door closed. She did this. The knowledge sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold and undeniable. My sister, my own sister, had planted drugs in my purse and watched them arrest me like I was a stranger, like I was disposable. The door opened, and Officer Daniels returned with a clipboard and that same professional expression. Behind him came a woman in a TSA supervisor uniform, her badge reading Martinez S. She looked like someone who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Miss Cruz," Supervisor Martinez said, settling into the chair across from me, "I understand you're claiming these substances aren't yours." "They're not. I have no idea how they got in my bag." She consulted her clipboard. "According to your family, you've been under significant stress lately. Academic pressure," they said, acting distant and erratic. Academic pressure. The phrase made me want to laugh, but nothing about this was funny. I'd been under academic pressure my entire life. Pressure to get good grades, so maybe, finally, someone would notice me. Pressure to be perfect, because perfect daughters don't cause problems. Pressure to succeed, because success was the only currency my family understood. But I'd never turned to drugs. I'd barely even had a drink. My family, I started, then stopped. How do you explain that the people who should defend you are the ones throwing you under the bus? How do you make sense of betrayal that deep? "Ma'am, we can arrange for them to come in. Sometimes family conversations help clarify these situations." I almost said no, almost demanded a lawyer instead. But part of me, the stupid, hopeful part that still believed in family loyalty, wanted to give them a chance to do the right thing. "Okay," I said. "Bring them in." 5 minutes later, the small gray room felt even smaller with all of us crammed inside. Mom took the chair closest to me, but didn't meet my eyes. Dad stood against the wall like he was guarding the exit, and Marissa perched on the edge of her chair, the picture of concerned, sisterly love. Supervisor Martinez didn't waste time on pleasantries. "We found controlled substances in your daughter's bag. She claims they aren't hers. Can you shed any light on the situation?" The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds where my parents could have said, "Of course they're not hers. This is obviously a mistake." 3 seconds where they could have demanded to know who had access to my bag. 3 seconds where they could have fought for me. Instead, Mom started crying. "We've been so worried about her," she said, her voice breaking perfectly. "The pressure she puts on herself, the way she's been isolating lately. We tried to talk to her, but she just shuts us out." Each word was a knife between my ribs. Isolating? I've been working 2 jobs to pay for this trip while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. I've been planning my future, not plotting my downfall. Dad nodded slowly, like Mom's words were confirming his worst fears. "She's always been the type to bottle things up. Maybe she thought this would help with her anxiety." "I don't have anxiety," I said, but nobody was listening. Marissa leaned forward, her eyes wide with perfectly performed concern. "I tried to talk to her about it last week. She seemed so overwhelmed, so desperate to get away from everything. Maybe she thought this would help her cope with the flight or the interview pressure." The lie was so detailed, so believable, so completely insane that I just stared at her. This was my sister, the girl I'd covered for when she snuck out in high school, the girl I'd loaned money to when she couldn't make rent, the girl I'd defended to our parents over and over again, even when she didn't deserve it. And she was sitting there, looking TSA officers in the eye and painting me as a drug-addled mess who'd finally cracked under pressure. "That's not true," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "None of that is true." Supervisor Martinez made a note on her clipboard. "Miss Cruz, your family seems genuinely concerned about your well-being. Perhaps this is an opportunity to get the help you need." Help I need.
Like I was sick. Like I was the problem. I looked around the room at the three people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Mom was still crying, but her tears felt performative now, like she was playing the role of the devastated mother instead of actually being one. Dad was studying the floor like it contained the secrets of the universe. And Marissa? Marissa was watching me with those same calm, calculating eyes. Not worried, not sad, not even pretending anymore because she knew she'd already won. I want a lawyer. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock and disappointment. "Natalie," Mom gasped, "don't be dramatic. We're just trying to help." "Are you? Because it feels like you're trying to convict me." Dad finally looked up. "Nobody's trying to convict anyone, but if you've made some mistakes, if you've gotten mixed up in something—" "I haven't." The anger was building now, hot and clean and clarifying. "I haven't made any mistakes. I didn't put those drugs in my bag. I don't even know what they are." "Then how did they get there?" Marissa asked, and her voice was so perfectly reasonable, so genuinely puzzled, that I just wanted to scream. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye. "You tell me then."
I was completely, utterly alone. But for the first time in my life, I was also completely, utterly sure of who the enemy was. "I want that lawyer now," I said, and I stopped looking at my family entirely. They moved me to a different room after I asked for a lawyer. Smaller, colder, but kind of place designed to make you feel like you'd already been forgotten by the world. No windows, no clock, just 4 beige walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, and 2 chairs that had probably witnessed 1,000 other people's worst days. The fluorescent light above buzzed like an angry wasp, casting everything in that sickly green tint that makes everyone look guilty. I sat there, still handcuffed, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. My family, my own blood, had looked TSA officers in the eye and painted me as a drug-addled mess. They'd taken Marissa's lies and wrapped them in concerned parent voices, making them sound like truth. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was how smoothly they'd done it, like they'd been waiting for this moment, like they'd already decided long before today that I was expendable. My phone call. I kept thinking about my phone call. One chance to reach the outside world, to find someone who might actually believe me. Mom and Dad were out. They'd already chosen their side. Marissa was obviously out of the question. But there was Ava, my best friend since college orientation, the one person who'd never asked me to be anything other than exactly who I was. If anyone would fight for me, it would be her. The door opened and Officer Daniels stepped in with a cordless phone and that same professional expression. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of my family in the hallway. Mom was pacing, Dad was on his phone, probably calling his work to explain why he'd be late, and Marissa was sitting perfectly still, scrolling through her Instagram like nothing had happened. Like her sister wasn't sitting in a TSA holding room facing federal charges. "Your phone call," Officer Daniels said, setting the phone on the table. "You have 10 minutes. I dialed Ava's number with shaking fingers, praying she wasn't in class or at work or anywhere else that would make her unavailable when I needed her most. She picked up on the second ring. "Nat, what's wrong? Aren't you supposed to be on a plane right now?" The sound of her voice, worried but not surprised, like she'd half expecting something to go sideways, almost broke me right there. "Ava," I said, and my voice cracked on her name. "I'm in trouble. Real trouble." "Where are you?" "TSA holding room at LAX. They found drugs in my purse. Prescription bottles, some kind of powder. I swear to God, I've never seen them before in my life." Silence on the other end. Not the bad kind, the thinking kind. "Drugs. In your purse. The purse you packed yourself this morning." "Yes, except
I stopped, except for those few seconds at the security checkpoint when Marissa hugged me goodbye, when she'd adjusted my purse strap with those careful, practiced fingers. Except what? Ava's voice was sharp now, like she was already putting pieces together. Except Marissa hugged me before I went through security. She touched my purse. That bitch. The venom in her voice was so immediate, so fierce, that for the first time in hours, I felt like someone was on my side. It gets worse, I said. My parents are backing her up. They're telling TSA that I've been acting strange, that I'm stressed about the interview, that maybe I turned to drugs to cope. What the actual fuck, Natalie? Your own parents! They're treating me like I'm guilty, like this is just some inevitable outcome of me finally cracking under pressure. I could hear Ava moving around, probably grabbing her keys and jacket. She was the kind of person who showed up first and asked questions later. Okay, I'm coming to get you. What do you need me to do? I don't know. Get me a lawyer. Call the school and explain why I'm going to miss my interview. Figure out how to prove I didn't put drugs in my own goddamn purse.
The security cameras, Ava said suddenly. LAX has cameras everywhere. If Marissa put something in your bag, there's gotta be footage. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since this nightmare started. You think they'd check? They will if we give them a reason to. I'm calling my cousin. She's a criminal defense attorney. She'll know what to do. Officer Daniels tapped his watch, reminding me that time was running out. I have to go, I said, but Ava, yeah? Thank you for believing me. Of course I believe you, you idiot. You won't even take Advil without reading the label 3 times. The idea of you doing illegal drugs is insane. The line went dead and I handed the phone back to Officer Daniels. For the first time since this started, I felt like I could breathe properly. Someone was on my side. Someone was fighting for me. Someone believed me. Your family would like to speak with you again, Officer Daniels said. I almost laughed. Of course they did. Now that I'd called for backup, now that this was about to become a real legal battle instead of just a family cover-up, suddenly they wanted to talk. Tell them I'll speak to them through my lawyer. His eyebrows raised slightly. You sure about that? Sometimes these things can be resolved more easily within families. I thought about Marissa's calm face as they led me away, about Mom's performative tears, about Dad's refusal to even look at me. I'm sure. He left me alone again, and I settled back into the uncomfortable chair to wait. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The walls seemed to press closer, and somewhere out there, my sister was probably already crafting the next chapter of her victim narrative. But I wasn't the same person who'd walked into this room an hour ago. That person still believed her family would protect her. That person still thought love was unconditional. This person knew better. This person was going to fight. Ava arrived like a hurricane in designer jeans. I heard her voice before I saw her, sharp, commanding, cutting through the bureaucratic murmur of the TSA office like a knife through butter. She was arguing with someone about visitor policies and constitutional rights and why exactly they thought they could hold an American citizen without proper legal representation. 20 minutes later, Officer Daniels opened my holding room door with the expression of a man who just met his match. Your attorney is here. The woman who walked in behind him was nothing like I had expected. Petite, maybe 35, wearing a power suit that cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes were the kind sharp that suggested she ate TSA protocols for breakfast. Sarah Chen, she said, extending her hand. Ava's cousin. I understand you've had an eventful morning. Behind her, Ava squeezed into the room and immediately wrapped me in a hug that smelled like her vanilla perfume and righteous fury. I brought in reinforcements, she whispered in my ear. Sarah Chen was already pulling files from her briefcase, transforming the small gray room into what looked like a war room. She had copies of TSA regulations, precedent cases, and a legal pad covered in notes she had apparently made during the 20-minute drive from her downtown office. First things first, she said, settling into the chair across from me. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out, no matter how small or insignificant it seems. So I did. The family trip to the airport, Marissa's strange mood, the hug goodbye, the discovery of the drugs, my parents' immediate betrayal. All of it spilled out in a rush of words and barely contained rage.
Sarah took notes in quick, precise strokes. She didn't gasp or express shock or offer meaningless reassurances. She just listened, processed, and planned.
They will now. She flipped through her legal pad. I'm going to request a full forensic analysis of the evidence. Fingerprints, DNA, anything that can prove you didn't handle those substances. Ava leaned forward. What about the security cameras? I told Natalie there have to be cameras that caught Marissa near her purse. Excellent point. I'll subpoena the footage from every camera in that security area. Sarah's pen moved across the page. LAX has some of the most comprehensive surveillance systems in the world. If your sister touched your bag, we'll have video proof. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt something approaching hope. These women, my real family, I was starting to realize, weren't just believing me, they were building a case. What about my parents? I asked. They lied to TSA officers. They supported Marissa's story even though they had to know it wasn't true. Sarah's expression hardened. That's more complicated. Technically, they didn't witness the alleged crime, so their statements about your behavior are just opinions. Misguided opinions, but not necessarily illegal ones. They threw me under the bus. Yes, she said simply. They did, and we'll remember that when this is over. A knock on the door interrupted us. Officer Daniels peeked in, looking harried. Ms. Chen, your client's family is requesting another meeting. They say they have additional information that might be relevant. Sarah and I exchanged glances. Additional information. Right. What kind of information? Sarah asked. They didn't specify, but they seemed quite insistent. I almost said no automatically. I was done being ambushed by my own family, done letting them control the narrative. But Sarah put a hand on my arm. Let's hear what they have to say, she said quietly. Sometimes people reveal more than they intend to when they're trying to manage a crisis. You think they'll slip up? I asked. I think desperate people make mistakes, and right now, if your sister really did this, she's got to be feeling pretty desperate. Officer Daniels led us to a larger conference room, where my parents and Marissa were waiting. The space felt different with Sarah there. Official, adversarial, like we were finally calling this what it was, a legal battle instead of a family discussion. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, but she wasn't crying anymore. Dad sat rigid in his chair playing with his wedding ring the way he always did when he was nervous. And Marissa looked tired. For the first time all day, she looked like someone who was working hard to maintain a performance instead of just naturally inhabiting it. Natalie, Mom said as we sat down, we've been talking and we think— My client isn't here to listen to opinions, Sarah interrupted smoothly. Officer Daniels said you have additional information about this case. What information? The room went quiet. Mom glanced at Dad, who glanced at Marissa, who stared at the table. Well, Dad said finally, we remembered that Natalie has been having money problems lately, working 2 jobs, stressed about finances. Maybe she was trying to supplement her income somehow? The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Not only was I a drug user, now I was a drug dealer too? That's completely— I started, but Sarah's hand on my arm stopped me. Interesting theory, she said to my father. Do you have any evidence to support this claim? Bank records showing unusual deposits, witnesses who saw her engaging in drug transactions? Any proof at all? Dad's face reddened. Well, no, but— Then it's not information. It's speculation. And frankly, it's harmful speculation about your own daughter. Marissa finally looked up from the table. We're just trying to understand how this happened, how those drugs got in her bag. There it was, the opening Sarah had been waiting for. Good question, Sarah said, pulling out her own legal pad. Since you're so concerned about understanding the chain of custody, let's establish everyone who had access to Natalie's purse today. She started writing.
Natalie packed the bag for self this morning. She carried it from her apartment to your car. You all drove to the airport together. She carried it from the car to the security checkpoint, and then she looked up at Marissa. You hugged her goodbye?
So you had physical contact with the bag. Your hands were near it, possibly on it. Marissa shrugged, but something flickered in her eyes. I hugged my sister. That's not a crime. No, Sarah agreed, but planting drugs in someone's luggage is. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's mouth opened and closed without sound. Dad went very still, and Marissa's calm mask finally started to crack. That's ridiculous, she said, but her voice was higher now, strained. Why would I do something like that? Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. That's exactly what we're going to find out. The real TSA interrogation room was nothing like the holding room. Bigger, brighter, with a mirror that fooled no one, and recording equipment that made everything feel official and terrifying. Officer Daniels had been joined by Supervisor Martinez and a man in a cheap suit who introduced himself as Agent Thompson from airport security. The kind of team they assembled when things moved beyond routine bag checks into federal crime territory. Sarah sat beside me, her legal pad ready, radiating the kind of calm confidence that comes from knowing you're on the right side of the law. Across the table, the TSA officials looked like they were settling in for a long afternoon. Ms. Cruz, Agent Thompson began, we appreciate your cooperation in this matter. We understand you've retained counsel, which is certainly your right, but we'd like to give you an opportunity to explain how controlled substances ended up in your possession. I looked at Sarah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I can't explain it, because I didn't put them there. According to your family, you've been under significant stress lately. Academic pressure, financial difficulties, social isolation. These are all risk factors for substance abuse. Each word felt like another nail in a coffin my own parents had helped build. My family is wrong. I don't use drugs, I've never used drugs, and I've never been involved in drug trafficking or sales or whatever you think this is. Agent Thompson consulted his file. The substances we found include unmarked prescription bottles containing what appears to be oxycodone and a bag of white powder that field tested positive for cocaine. These aren't recreational amounts, Miss Cruz. This suggests intent to distribute. Intent to distribute. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just about missing my interview anymore. This was about federal charges, prison time, my entire future dissolving into nothing. My client has already stated that these substances don't belong to her, Sarah interjected. Has your forensic team processed them for prints yet? Supervisor Martinez shifted uncomfortably. That process takes time. How much time? Standard procedure is 48 to 72 hours for full analysis. Sarah made a note. And in the meantime, my client sits in custody based on purely circumstantial evidence? The drugs were in her bag. That's hardly circumstantial. The drugs were in a bag that multiple people had access to, including her sister, who had physical contact with the bag immediately before the security screening. Officer Daniels looked up from his own notepad. Are you suggesting family involvement? Sarah's smile was razor sharp. I'm suggesting you do your job. Test the evidence for prints, pull the security footage, build a case based on facts instead of assumptions. The officials exchanged glances. I could see the calculation happening. Was this worth the hassle of a thorough investigation, or should they just proceed with the easy arrest? Agent Thompson leaned forward. Ms. Cruz, if someone else put these drugs in your bag, now would be the time to tell us. Family loyalty is admirable, but federal drug charges aren't something you want to face to protect someone else. This was it, my chance to throw Marissa under the bus the way she'd thrown me, to watch her world implode the way mine was imploding.
But I'd never been the kind of person who made accusations without proof. Even now, even after everything, I couldn't become that person. I don't know how those drugs got in my bag, but I know I didn't put them there. And I think if you test them for prints, you'll find evidence that supports my statement.
Agent Thompson stared at me for a long moment, then nodded to Supervisor Martinez. Process the evidence for prints, he said, full forensic workup, and pull the security footage from checkpoint 7 between 10 and 11 a.m. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. How long for the fingerprint results, she asked. Rush job? 6 hours? Maybe 8? 6 to 8 hours. 6 to 8 hours of sitting in this nightmare, waiting to see if science could prove what my heart already knew. In the meantime, Agent Thompson continued, Miss Cruz will need to remain in custody, given the serious nature of the charges. My client should be released on her own recognizance, Sarah interrupted. She has no criminal record, strong ties to the community, and every incentive to cooperate with this investigation. She's not a flight risk. She was literally about to board an international flight when we detained her. Sarah didn't miss a beat. For a scheduled academic interview that she's been preparing for months, hardly the behavior of someone planning to flee the country. The back and forth continued for another 20 minutes, legal chess played with my freedom as the stakes. In the end, they agreed to hold me in a TSA facility rather than transferring me to federal custody, a small mercy that Sarah treated it as a major victory. As they led me back to a holding area, I caught a glimpse through the window of my family in the hallway. Mom was crying again. Real tears this time, I thought, now that the reality of federal charges was setting in. Dad was pacing, probably calculating legal fees and damage to his reputation, and Marissa was sitting perfectly still, staring at her hands. For the first time all day, she looked scared. 6 hours, Sarah said as we reached the holding area. 6 hours and we'll know if your sister's fingerprints are on that evidence. What if they're not? I asked. What if she was smarter than I think, wore gloves or something? Sarah's expression was grim but determined. Then we look at the security footage. And if that doesn't work, we find another way, because innocent people don't belong in prison, Natalie, and I don't lose cases. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone again with the fluorescent lights and my racing thoughts. 6 hours. 6 hours to learn if my sister had been stupid enough to leave fingerprints on the evidence she'd planted. 6 hours to find out if the truth was enough to set me free. 6 hours to discover whether justice was real or just another story people told themselves to sleep at night. I settled back against the wall and started counting down the minutes. 5 hours and 43 minutes. That's how long I sat in that holding room watching the clock on the wall tick away my future 1 second at a time. 5 hours and 43 minutes of fluorescent lights and the smell of industrial disinfectant and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Then, Officer Daniels opened the door with an expression I couldn't read. "The results are in," he said. "Your lawyer wants to meet with you before we proceed." Sarah was waiting in the same conference room where my family had tried to bury me earlier. But this time she wasn't alone. Agent Thompson was there, along with Supervisor Martinez and a woman in a TSA supervisor uniform I hadn't seen before. And sitting at the far end of the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, was Marissa. "Natalie," Sarah said as I sat down beside her. The fingerprint analysis came back. My heart stopped. Everything stopped. The air in the room, the clock on the wall, the entire universe holding its breath for the answer that would either save my life or destroy it. The prescription bottles and the plastic bag both tested positive for fingerprints, Agent Thompson said, consulting a file thick with official-looking documents. Multiple sets, actually. Multiple sets? My stomach dropped. Of course there were multiple sets. Mine would be on there too if I'd handled my own purse, right? Even if I hadn't put the drugs there, even if I'd just moved things around.
"The prints we found belong to 2 individuals," he continued. "The first set belongs to you, Miss Cruz. Partial prints on the exterior of the bag and 1 bottle, consistent with normal handling of items in your purse." I couldn't breathe. Partial prints. Normal handling. That sounded not terrible. "The second set of prints," Agent Thompson said, his eyes shifting to Marissa, "belong to your sister. Full, clear prints on both bottles and the interior surface of the plastic bag. The kind of prints you get when someone is gripping objects intentionally, not just casually brushing against them. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the air conditioning humming in the walls. Marissa's face had gone white, not pale, white, like all the blood had simply drained out of her body and pooled somewhere around her feet. She started, then stopped. Started again. That's impossible. Agent Thompson opened the file and pulled out a series of photographs. Crime scene photos, I realized. Professional, clinical images of the evidence that had nearly destroyed my life. "These are the bottles in question," he said, sliding the photos across the table. "And these are the enhanced prints we lifted from them. Would you like to explain how your fingerprints ended up on drug paraphernalia found in your sister's luggage?" Marissa stared at the photos like they were written in a foreign language. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. For the first time in my life, I was watching my silver-tongued sister completely lose the ability to speak. She whispered, "I don't know how. I never." "Miss Cruz," the new TSA supervisor said, and I realized she was talking to Marissa, not me. "I'm Supervisor Williams from Internal Affairs. We need to discuss your actions in the security checkpoint today." Internal Affairs. This was real. This was happening. My sister was about to be arrested for framing me, and the look on her face said she finally understood that her careful plan had just exploded in spectacular fashion. "Where are our parents?" I asked, looking around the room. "They're in the hallway," Sarah said quietly. "They've been informed of the test results." I tried to imagine that conversation, Mom's world crashing down as she realized she'd backed the wrong daughter. Dad's silent horror at the thought of explaining this to his coworkers, his friends, his poker buddies. But mostly I tried to imagine them finally understanding that they'd thrown their innocent child under the bus for the guilty one. "Marissa," Agent Thompson said, and his voice was different now. Not the careful neutrality he'd used with me, but something harder, more certain. "We need you to explain how your fingerprints ended up on these items." She stared at him with wild eyes. "I don't have to explain anything. I want a lawyer." Too late, I thought. Too late to ask for protection when you're the one who needed protection from. Sarah leaned forward. "Before you lawyer up, Miss Cruz, you should know that planting controlled substances in someone's luggage is a federal crime. Intent to distribute controlled substances is a federal crime. Conspiracy to frame someone for federal crimes is also a federal crime. You're looking at serious prison time." "But," Marissa's voice cracked, "she wasn't supposed to get arrested. It was just supposed to delay her, make her miss the flight. I never thought they'd actually arrest her." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Agent Thompson was already reaching for his handcuffs. "So you admit to placing the substances in your sister's bag?" Supervisor Williams asked. And that's when Marissa finally completely broke. "She always gets everything!" The words exploded out of her like they'd been building pressure for years. "Perfect grades, perfect scholarship, perfect future. She gets to travel the world while I'm stuck here working retail jobs and living with Mom and Dad like a failure." Each word was a knife through whatever was left of my heart. Not because she was confessing, I'd known it was her for hours now, but because of the pure, concentrated hatred in her voice, the years of resentment that had been simmering under every family dinner, every birthday party, every conversation where she'd pretended to be proud of my accomplishments. "I just wanted her to miss the interview," she continued, tears streaming down her face now. "I thought they'd delay her for a few hours, maybe overnight. I thought she'd have to come home and we could all go back to normal." Normal. Like the twisted family dynamic where she was the center of attention and I was the invisible supporting player was something worth preserving. "Where did you get the drugs?" Agent Thompson asked, his pen moving across his notepad. From a guy I know, an ex-boyfriend. I told him I needed them for a party." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking younger than her 24 years. "I didn't think about fingerprints. I wasn't thinking." "No," I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady.
You were thinking. You planned this. You brought drugs to a federal building and planted them on your own sister. You watched them arrest me and said nothing. You let Mom and Dad paint me as unstable and addicted, and you backed up every lie. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second I saw something that might have been regret. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Natalie, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." But sorry doesn't undo handcuffs. Sorry doesn't fix the terror of thinking your life is over. Sorry doesn't heal the knowledge that your own family was willing to sacrifice you to protect their favorite child. "Ms. Marissa Cruz," Agent Thompson said, standing up, "you're under arrest for possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute, conspiracy, and federal evidence tampering." As he read her rights, I watched my sister's face crumble completely. The confident, manipulative woman who'd orchestrated my downfall was gone, replaced by a scared girl who'd finally realized that actions have consequences. "Natalie," she said as they cuffed her, "please, tell them I didn't mean—" "I'll tell them exactly what you meant. Every word." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I meant every word I said. They brought my parents in separately. Mom first, her eyes red and swollen, her usually perfect makeup streaked down her cheeks in gray rivers. She'd been crying for hours, I realized. Not the performative tears from earlier, but the ugly, gut-wrenching sobs of someone whose world had just collapsed. She sat down across from me in the same conference room where Marissa had confessed, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Sarah had offered to stay, but I'd asked her to wait outside. This conversation needed to happen without lawyers and legal strategies and professional protocols. This needed to happen between a mother and the daughter she'd betrayed. "Mija," Mom whispered, and the word came out broken. "I'm so sorry." I studied her face, looking for the woman who'd stood in this room hours earlier and told TSA officers that I was unstable, who'd nodded along as Marissa painted me as a drug user, who chose her favorite child's lies over her other child's truth. Are you? Are you sorry you didn't believe me? Or are you sorry you got caught backing the wrong daughter? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I never wanted this to happen to you. But you let it happen. When they found drugs in my bag, your first instinct wasn't to defend me. It was to assume I was guilty. You have to understand, she reached across the table like she wanted to touch my hands, and I pulled them back. Marissa has always been difficult. She struggled so much, and you've always been so strong, so capable. I thought if she was involved, maybe she was trying to help you somehow. Help me. By planting drugs in my luggage. The logic was so twisted, so desperate that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You thought she was helping me by getting me arrested on federal drug charges. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared and confused, and I defaulted to protecting her because she's always needed more protection. There it was. The truth that had shaped my entire childhood laid bare in one sentence. Marissa needed protection, so I got none. Marissa needed attention, so I got ignored. Marissa needed support, so I learned to support myself. What about protecting me? What about believing in me? What about thinking, even for 1 second, that maybe your straight-A, scholarship-winning, never-been-in-trouble daughter didn't suddenly become a drug dealer? She was crying again, but quieter now. The kind of tears that come from finally understanding the weight of your mistakes. I failed you. I've been failing you for years, and I didn't even realize it until today. I wanted to disagree with her. I wanted to be the bigger person, to offer forgiveness and healing and all the things good daughters are supposed to offer their mothers. But I was tired of being the good daughter. I was tired of making things easy for everyone else. Yes, I said. Yes,
You did fail me, and I don't know if I can forgive that.
She nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue that was already soaked through. I understand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I agreed. You don't. The door opened, and Agent Thompson looked in. Mrs. Cruz, we need to speak with your husband now. Mom stood up slowly, like her bones had aged years in the past few hours. At the doorway, she turned back. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For fighting back. For not just accepting what we tried to do to you. I should have taught you to be strong, but somehow you learned it anyway. The door closed behind her, and I sat alone for exactly 3 minutes before they brought Dad in. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. Like the man who'd worked double shifts and avoided family drama had finally been forced to confront the consequences of his silence. Natalie, he said, sitting down heavily, I don't know what to say to you. How about the truth? I suggested. How about admitting that you knew something was wrong but went along with it because it was easier than standing up to Mom and Marissa? He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands the way he had all day. The same hands that had refused to defend me, refused to fight for me, refused to do anything but stay safely on the sidelines. You're right, he said finally. I knew something wasn't right. Marissa's story, your mother's reaction, the whole thing felt off. But I convinced myself that if I just stayed quiet, if I just let other people handle it, somehow it would work out. It would have worked out with me in federal prison. I know. His voice was barely above a whisper. I know, and I have to live with that. Do you? Do you really have to live with it? Because in my experience, you're pretty good at avoiding things that make you uncomfortable. That got a reaction. His head snapped up, and for the first time all day, he looked me in the eye. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you defended me, Dad? When was the last time you chose my side in anything? When was the last time you acted like you actually cared about what happened to me? He opened his mouth, then closed it, opened it again. I care about you. No, I said. You love me. There's a difference. Love is passive. Love is easy. Caring requires action. Caring requires showing up. And you've never shown up for me. The silence stretched between us like a canyon. On the other side of the table, my father looked like a man finally seeing himself clearly for the first time. What can I do? How can I fix this? I thought about it. Really thought about it. What would it take for me to trust him again? What would it take for me to believe that he'd actually fight for me if it mattered? You can't, I said finally. Not now. Maybe not ever. But you can start by admitting that your silence has consequences. You can start by acknowledging that staying neutral when your daughter is being destroyed isn't actually neutral. It's choosing a side. He nodded slowly. I chose wrong. Yes, you did. Sarah knocked on the door and stepped in. Natalie, Agent Thompson wants to update you on the charges. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting in uncomfortable chairs for hours. At the door, I looked back at my father one more time. For what it's worth, I hope you learn to show up for people. Maybe not for me. I think that ship has sailed. But for someone. Because the world has enough people who look the other way when things get hard. I walked out of the room and didn't look back. The paperwork took another hour. Forms to drop the charges against me. Forms to file charges against Marissa. Forms to document the evidence. The investigation. The complete reversal of everything that had seemed certain 6 hours earlier. I signed my name so many times it stopped looking like letters and started looking like meaningless scratches on endless white pages.
Sarah handled most of it, her pen moving efficiently through legal documents while I sat in yet another government-issued chair and tried to process the fact that I was free. Not just free from custody, but free from the weight of being the family scapegoat. The invisible daughter, the one who was expected to absorb everyone else's problems without complaint. "That's it," Sarah said finally, capping her pen and sliding the last form across the table to Agent Thompson. "My client is free to go." Free to go. The words should have felt like victory, but instead they felt hollow. I was free to go, but go where? My interview was missed. My family was shattered. My sister was facing federal charges because of choices she'd made, but consequences we'd all have to live with. Agent Thompson shook my hand with the same professional courtesy he'd shown when he was interrogating me. "Miss Cruz, I want to apologize for what you went through today. The system worked, eventually, but that doesn't make the experience any less traumatic." "Thank you," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was thanking him for. For believing the evidence? For doing his job? For treating me like a human being once it was proven I wasn't a criminal? Ava was waiting in the main TSA office, pacing back and forth with the kind of nervous energy that comes from helplessness. When she saw me walk out, she ran across the room and grabbed me in a hug that lifted me off my feet. "Jesus Christ, Nat," she said into my hair. "I thought I was going to have to visit you in federal prison." For a while there, so did I. She held me at arm's length, studying my face like she was looking for damage. "How are you? Really?" I considered the question. How was I? Free? Vindicated? Proven innocent? But also betrayed, abandoned, and fundamentally changed by the knowledge of what my family was willing to do to me. "I'm surviving," I said. "I think that's the best I can do right now." Sarah joined us, her briefcase in one hand and a business card in the other. "Natalie, if you decide to pursue civil action against your family for emotional distress, defamation, anything, call me. What they did to you today goes beyond family drama. It was systematic character assassination, and there are legal remedies for that." I took the card, but didn't commit to anything. The idea of suing my parents felt both appropriate and exhausting. "What happens to Marissa?" I asked. "Federal charges. Possession with intent to distribute, evidence tampering, conspiracy. She'll probably plead down to something lesser, but she's looking at real jail time. Her lawyer will try to paint it as a family dispute that got out of hand, but the evidence is pretty clear about her intent." Jail time. My sister. In federal prison. Because she couldn't stand the thought of me succeeding? The poetic justice of it should have felt satisfying, but it just felt sad. And my parents? Technically, they didn't commit any crimes. Lying to TSA officers isn't illegal if you believe you're telling the truth. But their credibility is shot, and if this goes to trial, their testimony will reflect very poorly on them. We walked through the terminal together, past the security checkpoint where this nightmare had started, past the gate where my flight had departed hours ago without me. The airport that had felt like a prison was just an airport again. Busy, impersonal, full of people rushing toward their own destinations. In the parking garage, I finally asked the question that had been building in my chest all day. "Ava, what would you have done? If it was your sister, your parents, would you have fought as hard for me as you did today?" She stopped walking and turned to face me. "Nat, you're asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" "You're asking what I would have done for you, but the real question is what they should have done for you. And the answer is everything. They should have done everything." In her car, driving away from LAX in the orange glow of Los Angeles sunset, I called the one person who'd always believed in me without question. "Abuela?" I said when Grandma Rosa picked up. "Mija, how did your interview go? Are you calling from London?" I started crying then. Not the angry tears or the scared tears I'd shed throughout the day, but the exhausted, relieved tears of someone who had finally reached safety. "Abuela, I need to come home. Not to Mom and Dad's house, to your house. Can I come home?" "Of course, mija. Always. What happened?"